Last time on DataBard, we attempted to use SSMS Copilot to design an ETL pattern to process data from our DBO schema to our DIM and fact schemas. And we got pretty far for 45 minutes. But a couple things that I would have loved to see included in the pattern. So we're going to extend our time a little bit and see if we can get a couple more bells and whistles added into the pattern on today's chapter of DataBard. DataBard, 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 DataBard. Dabba, 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 hoi, hoi, hoi. So to revisit what we did, we were designing a pattern where the goal was to have the ETL completely designed by the Copilot. I wasn't allowed to write any code myself. The goal is to try and get more of a full vibe code experience. And granted, is this the way that we should do it? Fully having it writing the code, not making any adjustments ourselves? No. But we're intentionally doing this to push the limits. So today, we're extending our time on ETL design patterns by 30 minutes to allow us to try and do the following. We're going to try and solve the fact that the process wasn't rerunnable. We're going to try and solve a problem of our tables didn't have any unknown references, so we're going to fix that. And then we're going to try and add in some additional error logging, and with luck, we'll try and do some incremental processing as well. 30 minutes, start the timer, let's go. Alright, back at it, we're going to make this pattern better, and we're giving ourselves an extra 30 minutes. So let's start knocking out these problems one by one. The first one I mentioned is the rerunnability of this pattern, which right now it isn't. Let me open up the procedure again, and let's take a look at why. So go into modify. As long as I'm thinking of it, we're going to hit add over here. All right. Yep, I want to have my typical line endings, please. Thank you. We'll do add SQL query 3 so it gets that context. And let's take a look at this procedure again, because there's an important thing it forgot to do. This is intended to be a single procedure to do the whole thing. Again, we wouldn't typically design it this way. We're doing it for demonstration purposes. But notice here we do an initial insert, and then we've got some merge statements here to handle the STD capabilities, and a final insert for new records that aren't updates. Oh no, wait, that are updates to records that have expired. We have all that, but what's the one thing that we forgot? Our process is using a staging table, and it never takes the time to actually clean that staging table out. That's a problem. If I run this again, it's just going to insert the data again and again and again, causing significant duplication over time. Let's see if Copilot's going to be able to figure out that this is a problem and that we need to fix it. So I'm going to ask Copilot, take a look at dbo.usp_process employee data. I'm concerned that rerunning this procedure will result in duplication of data. Assess the procedure and provide recommendations on what I should add or adjust in the procedure so that it can run multiple times and not duplicate data. So what are we looking for here? Typical delete statements. Delete from our staging table, truncating from our staging table. Anything along those lines should work fairly well. Let's see what it comes up with. Alright, it's going to generate the response. Let's start taking a look. The procedure appears to process data incrementally, implementing slowly changing dimension type 2 logic. Okay, it's catching that part, which is good. However, there are potential risks of data duplication when rerunning the procedure. Below are the key observations and recommendations to ensure Idempotency. Idempotency? I'm gonna have to actually look up that word. I don't know what that means. Idempotency. And avoid duplication. Good job. Good job, Copilot. You actually threw words at me that I don't understand. That's cool. So, observations. The staging table insert. The procedure inserts all roles from DBO employees into stage employees without filtering for new or changed records. This can lead to redundant data in the staging table. Which is interesting. So, its idea there is assuming that we're only going to be getting updates to data, which I suppose is fine. Well, no, it does say change records. So, that's a valid point, but I don't know if I necessarily deal with it that way. Merge statement. The merge statement handles updates and inserts into the table. However, there's no explicit check to ensure that only new or changed records are processed. Additional insert into employees outside the merge statement could result in duplicate records if the same data is processed multiple times. There's no mechanism to present reprocessing of the same data from the ETL run log. Which is a fair point. The batch logging isn't going to change anything to prevent reprocessing of the same data. We don't have any controls in there. So what are you going to recommend? Avoid duplication. Consider the following adjustments. Add a filter to insert only new or changed records. For example, compare so only to insert new or changed records. Alright, that doesn't solve it yet. Ensure the merge statement handles all scenarios comprehensively. Remove the redundant insert outside of the merge block. We checked that last time. I'm pretty sure that insert isn't redundant. I'll have to take a look at that up again, but I don't think it is redundant. Add a mechanism to track processed records, last processed data, and skip already processed data. So it's, this is interesting. It's solving more for the incremental than it is for the managing of the staging table. Rollbacks. Yeah, I feel like this kind of missed the mark. So inserts in here. So its solution to this is that it's going to only insert records where it detects that either the record does not exist for the employee yet, or it's checking those business columns to check if anything has changed. Remove the redundant, track process records, summary. Alright, so that's a pretty significant failure. So yeah, inaccurate response. And honestly, I haven't been doing this a whole lot in the videos, but this is a good reminder. When you're interacting with this, make sure you take the time, give it a thumbs up or thumbs down on the responses, because it helps at least train the models in the future. Not detect that staging truncation was needed. Instead, solved for incremental processing, which is not what we asked for. And we'll share that prompt and response there too, just for kicks and giggles. Alright, let's try one more and then we'll give it an explicit, you're going to go ahead and this is how you're going to solve the problem. So the issue is with truncation, with the staging table never getting data removed from it, as cleaning out the data would support future runs in processing the data. How would you handle keeping the data in the staging? I should say handle cleaning out data from the staging table within this procedure. mean, supposedly, maybe in a staging table there is a way that you can write the process that you don't necessarily need to clean out data that you've already processed. Typically, though, I found that's why you do staging tables in the first place, is you have the flexibility to do that. To handle cleaning out data from the staging table within the procedure, you can incorporate a step to remove or archive the data. Recommended truncate. Here we go. Alright, so when we tell it specifically that problem, it has recommendations there. So truncate. Delete, which will give us control over specific batch IDs. If for any reason you need to maintain data in the table for batching purposes, I suppose... I can't think of any architectures up front, but I'll maybe noodle on that a little bit. Archiving processed data. And interesting, it would actually recommend archiving it and archiving your staged data. I suppose if you want to get very particular about how you can report on the success of your process and how the data itself looks like mid-process, may be nice. Seems a little bit overkill for me. So we'll just take the truncate table option that it gave us, and we'll add that in where it belongs. And it comes in with a nice, comfy comment. Lovely. Alright. Let F5 make sure that executes correctly. Great. Alright. Now that should put us in a situation where, whether we're processing the entire data set, or if we're doing incremental processing, this makes it a repeatable process. Problem 1 solved. Let's go to the next one. The next one was, there isn't anything in here for unknown records. And we'll solve this with dim region specifically, since that's where the lookup occurs here. So let's initially ask Copilot if it can detect if there's an unknown record. Can you check DBO, oh sorry, not DBO, we want dim.regions to see if there is an unknown record in the table. If not, write a script that adds an unknown record using best practices. What best practices? Let's see what it comes up with. Obviously, for unknown records, what you'll often see, not that it's the only way to do it, is an unknown record is -1, is the identifier for it, and then for each of the business columns, it's some reference to 0, null, unknown values. There is no unknown record in dim regions. Good, it caught that. Below is a script to add an unknown record using best practices. Insert region ID, region name, insert date update. Alright, the script would give it the value of 1. I like -1 because it stands out a little bit more than using the value 1. 1 I typically expect to be the first value there. Unknown, get date, null. Null for update as it has not been updated yet. Looks good. So we will take this, we'll paste it, we'll allow ourselves to do the minor adjustment of changing this into a -1. Highlight that section. Let's insert it. Ooh, did you actually miss the schema? Does country allow non-nova? It does not. Sorry, that's an error. So unfortunately that means we have to rank this one down a little bit. It got the gist of it, but it wasn't 100% accurate. It's kind of a weird hallucination too, especially since there are other not null columns in there. Why it missed that one in particular is a bit weird. But we'll at least give it some grace and we'll fix it ourselves. This is the generated script to fail. Alright, doesn't have to be pretty, so we'll do country. Unknown. Alright. That fixed that well enough. Alright, unknown there. So now that I have the unknown record there, let's update our procedure so that it knows when it does the lookup to dim region in the statement down here. Here, select region key. It didn't give us, or it gave us just 1 as our default value. Oh yeah, we did test for that last time. Let's just go ahead and make that a -1. And that'll fix our procedure there. Good. Now we solve for unknown records. Next thing that we want to do, we have a logging table that one of the things it has is a error message column, but right now that's not doing anything. If our batch process fails, nothing gets logged. Let's change that and ask Copilot to adjust the process. So let's adjust dbo.usp process employee data. If an error occurs, there is no record of the error message was generated. Oh, there's a missing an R. I am not pushing up because that's going to go to the previous prompt again. We're going to hit R up here and just click through rather than doing that. Sorry for those purists who like just using your keyboard. I like using my mouse. In certain situations, not in all of them. There is no record of an error message that would be generated when the error occurs. Using the given architecture, and it did mention the ETL run log table earlier. So I think at least for an initial prompt, we're not going to pass that into it. Let's see if it can find it. Using the given architecture, propose how we would adjust this procedure and adjust this procedure to log the generated error. If other tables, views, or procedures are needed to accomplish this, you may recommend adding additional objects to the database. So again, what are we looking for here? There is an error message table within ETL run log. What we're hoping for is that it will know that that is not currently being populated by the procedure. And it should do 2 things. 1, it should detect that the error occurs and populate that field. The second thing we're hoping for here, try catch. Putting what we've done in the procedure so far in a try statement, and then if an error should occur, using a catch statement to then log the error. So what does it come up with? To adjust the procedure to log error messages, we can use a try catch block. Ta-da! This will allow us to capture the error details, error message, error number, severity, and log them into an error logging table. Recommended adjustments. It's not going to use the error message field, but it is going intentionally for more verbosity. It's going to be more verbose. Verbosity. We're going to be trying to add in a whole bunch of extra terms into this. So creating an error logging table is good. Modifying the procedure, example adjustments. All right, creating the error log. Error log, badge ID, points back to the batch table. That's good. Error number, severity. And this is at least for capturing typical information that is generated in most SQL Server database environments when an error occurs. So this is using at least what's available in the system. This will be interesting, though, to see if this works. I'm trying to remember right now for this implementation. I believe Azure SQL DB, even in its Fabric implementation, supports what I think it's going to reference in the procedure. Let's see what it's going to do. It adds in the begin try at the beginning. It's performing the same operations. For sake of argument, we're going to hope that it's going to keep doing the same thing. And here's our catch statement, inserting into the error log. And this is where it is using the system functions that gives you the information there. It had a log date. Oh, the log date had a default constraint on it. So rather than insert a value, it's using a default constraint. Probably best to make sure that that timestamp is 100% accurate, i.e. when the record actually hits the table. This is a pretty good response. This is a more sophisticated way to do this than what I was originally planning. We'll call that a win. So we'll take this, copy and paste it over here to create our table. Did it in the staging schema, which is where ETL run is, so that's fine. We'll adjust the table name so that we group things a little bit to be ETL underscore error log. Then in our list, it'll group it with ETL run log. Good. We have that. How well do I trust this that I'm willing to insert the whole thing? This is for experimental purposes. So I'm going to create a new query window, and that's where we'll insert our value. I really want to, but the backup guy in me doesn't want to go to that extreme. We'll at least then adjust this so that it's going to point to our new query window. There. Right. Alter procedure. There we go. We've got try catch in here. We have error logging in place. Haven't run it with the new changes in place, so let's take a quick moment. Let's see if we run into any errors at the moment. Do a nice simple exec. That. Process completed successfully. Let's check this order by employee ID. Since our employee ID is the natural key at source, if we see multiple records with this value, presumably that means either an evolution occurred or we're getting duplicates generated that we don't want to have. Survey says we have duplicate records. And they were all inserted on the same date, which is when we initially built this table. Let's just double check. The employee key is different. Effective start date is there, but it didn't evolve. Alright, something in our pattern isn't working here right now. I don't know if, at least for the sake of our time window, we're going to have time to fix this. This might have to be something that I do off video. Let's go in and let's make our last change, which is we still aren't really doing incremental processing. Because incremental processing, we talked about this in the previous video, is we want to have some date on our tables that helps identify when changes have occurred. I'm looking at the wrong table here. And when those changes occur, we want to focus on pulling in those records specifically. Also, I have to note here in this most recent version, the insert and the select statement are not quite formatted the way that I wanted to. Formatting, a good case for SSMS Copilot. We'll cover that in another video. But you can see here it still is pulling in the entirety of the table. So we're going to ask it directly, can we adjust the procedure? I want to make dbo.usp process employee data a procedure that incrementally processes the data from dbo. I always forget if it's plural. Employees rather than its current state, which processes the entire table every time. How do we adjust the procedure to enable incremental processing? And same thing here, there isn't, aside from hire date, there's not really a good date on dbo.employees to account for this. We want it to be able to add in a date of like a created date, updated date, something like that, that helps identify when records are inserted. Actually, that updated date is probably more important because that tells us when things have changed. So let's give it at least the license to do that. If needed, you can add columns to dbo.employees for detecting changes. I'm giving it a little bit more than I think I'd like to, so I'm expecting this to be a little bit more targeted and might work better. Response comes in. To adjust it to enable incremental processing, understand the current schema. If there are existing columns that can be used to detect changes. Yes, I know there isn't anything there. That's what I'm wanting you to see. Add columns for change tracking. If no suitable columns, modify the procedure. Process only rows that meet the incremental criteria. Doing a processed flag. You could probably do a process flag. Process flag is going to be a whole lot of extra work on the DBO process to be able to manage that. I think dates are a little bit easier to work with because process flag, it'll tell you if the record has been processed once, but if the record's ever updated, then you have to reset the value versus just setting the date, which not only tells you that a change has occurred, but also when it occurred. Allows you to do date-focused processing, which I like for variability. Use change tracking or temporal tables. Yes, I know change tracking exists. Temporal tables would work here too, to do tracking of changes automatically. That's not what we're going for here. So what is it going to do? It's going to add in last modified date and process flag. I'm going to accept the last modified date. I don't think I want to use the process flag, so we won't add that in, which means I can just copy everything up to that comma. Process that. Then we update the procedure for incremental processing. Create or alter procedure, process employee data, update employee set process link, output inserted done. That's a whole lot of things going on there. I'll have to research this after the fact to see if this is possible, because this does not make sense to me. At least for sure, if I were to write this, it's assuming that we want to focus on the process flag, which we got rid of. So we can give it at least a little bit of license that we're taking some license with that. But even so, just writing our initial select statement to have a where clause associated to it to check the value is significantly easier than what it's doing here. I'll update this for changes. Oh, it wants to create a trigger for it. If you really like triggers, you could do this. I'm not a fan of triggers. But I suppose, admittedly, this would be up to whoever's designing the application that would be inputting records into employees. So if you truly want to do triggers, you can. Please consider an alternative. Personal preference. Okay, personal preference. So, alright, it's okay, but it's not great. We'll make the change on this because we've been asking it this similar question throughout the past couple of videos, and it doesn't seem to know what to do here. So we'll just do where gosh, what do we call this last? Oh, wait, I need to do Control-Shift-R to refresh this. To date add. I always forget -5. So picks up data from the last 5 days. And there we get the incremental processing within our procedure. Much easier than what it's trying to do with the process flag. The approach it picked theoretically works, but there are simpler ways to do this, as checking the last modified date it suggested creating. But in any case, we made our couple of changes. We're a little bit over the half-an-hour mark, but there we go. Aside from that big bug that we have to check, we've got an ETL pattern that can now process multiple times successfully. Yay! Alright, thereabouts in the 30-minute mark, and there we go. A pattern that I still have to figure out what about the base part of it isn't working, but beyond that, it's got some very nice bells and whistles that we expect from a more sophisticated pattern. appropriately accounting for unknown records, being able to do those try catches, incremental processing. It can do those things, and it can do that in a incrementally way for the most part. What have we learned from this? Some foundational principles that go into ETL patterns of individual aspects of it. Things like truncation, try catch. When you tell it specific things like try catch, truncation, it knows what those things are. And as long as you mention something generally in the ballpark, it's more of a technical thing, so it has an easier job of understanding it. Unfortunately, in some cases when it comes to more sophisticated things like a broad ETL pattern, it gets the idea. It understands generally what needs to be done, but is it going to get the whole thing exactly right? Probably not, without some more detailed prompting, building it out section by section, versus as opposed to what I asked it to do, which is come up with an ETL pattern and see what you can do with that. So now we've got a successful pattern, one that can, for most intents and purposes, successfully process data from one type of architecture into another. But it's still only a pattern. It works for one table. We have 4 tables. What's coming up next? You guessed it. We're talking about patterns as copy and paste. So next time, we're going to see what Copilot can do for copying and pasting. That's what we've got for next time, so stay tuned. It's going to be an awesome video, I guarantee it. But that does bring us to the end of this chapter, and thank you for watching. If this video is helpful, and if you're finding these experiments enjoyable, please, you know what to do. Like button, subscribe to the channel, because we're not done here. We're going to keep going with this and other types of Copilot-based experiments. And if you have certain things that you want to see me do something completely crazy with this architecture that you wouldn't do elsewhere, let me know in the comments. That's what they're there for. Let's have a conversation, talk about what's on your mind, and maybe your ideas will show up in a future video. For now, I'm Data Bard, and I'll see you in the next chapter.